We finally made it, the last episode of this arc. After this, we are done. It has been quite the odyssey, and not in a good way, but the journey is almost over. I feel like Odysseus about to finally return back home to Ithaca after years of pointless suffering, bad decisions, and endless detours that should never have existed in the first place. This arc has tested my patience, my sanity, and my tolerance for lazy writing at every step. Reaching the end does not feel triumphant or emotional. It just feels like relief. Relief that the suffering is almost over and that I never have to pretend this mess was worth the journey. No human being should have to endure this level of pain and suffering. King Priam faced less shame when he kissed the hands of Achilles after Achilles killed Hector than I have endured sitting through this arc. At least Priam had dignity, purpose, and a moment that actually meant something. This arc offers none of that, just endless boredom, forced emotion, and humiliation disguised as storytelling. Watching this feels less like entertainment and more like a punishment handed down by cruel gods who hate good writing. Watching this show should count as one of the 12 labors of Heracles. Maybe even all 12. Every episode is a Herculean test of patience, endurance, and sanity. Sitting through it feels like carrying the world on your shoulders, fighting monsters that make no sense, and getting absolutely nothing in return. If surviving this franchise were an ancient myth, it would go down as the ultimate impossible task, a punishment for anyone foolish enough to start it. Sword Art Online is the worst anime of all time, no doubt about it. It fails at basic storytelling, relies on lazy writing and forced emotion, ignores its own rules and somehow still expects blind praise. Other bad shows might stumble or misfire, but this one keeps doubling down on bad ideas while pretending it is deep or meaningful. The fact that it is still defended so fiercely only makes its flaws stand out even more. The fans who worship this dumpster fire need to grow up and see the world as it really is. Blindly praising lazy writing, forced drama, and constant plot nonsense does not make the show good. It just shows a refusal to think critically. Defending this mess like it is some timeless masterpiece is embarrassing and delusional, not passionate. It is baffling that this is considered to be the best arc of Sword Art Online. There is nothing good here. No strong writing, no earned emotion, no smart ideas, no stakes that matter. People praise it like it is some crowning achievement, when in reality it is just a slow, hollow slog full of forced sadness and lazy choices. You are genuinely more likely to find extraterrestrial life on another planet than to find a single well-written moment in this arc. I could have stopped watching this garbage show a long time ago, but that would be giving it mercy, and it has earned none. Walking away would be too kind. The only proper response is to keep watching and rip it apart piece by piece, calling out every lazy choice, every forced emotional beat, and every bit of nonsense it tries to pass off as storytelling. If the show insists on wasting my time, then the least I can do is make sure its flaws do not go unnoticed. Sword Art Online has received more than enough blind praise. It has been endlessly hyped, defended, and worshipped despite its lazy writing, forced drama, and constant nonsense. At this point, it does not need more compliments or excuses. What it needs is honest criticism, because praise this undeserved only lets bad storytelling keep getting rewarded. This anime was never good, and it never will be good. From the very beginning, it was built on lazy ideas, shallow characters, and rules that only matter until the plot needs to ignore them. Instead of improving, it just kept stacking bad decisions on top of bad decisions and relied on blind fan worship to carry it forward. Every new arc pretends it has learned something, and every time it proves that it has learned nothing at all. No amount of nostalgia, excuses, or desperate praise will ever fix something that was broken at its core from day one. The fact that fans consider this arc to be the best of the series is genuinely laughable. This is what they think is amazing. A slow, bloated mess full of forced sadness, lazy writing, and nothing of real value happening on screen. If this is the high point, then that just confirms how low the bar is. Calling this arc great does not say anything good about the show. It only exposes how poor the standards are of the people praising it. I could literally sit here and list thousands of movies or shows that are far better than Sword Art Online. Ones that have more competent writing in a single scene than this entire series has across all its arcs combined. There are stories that build real characters, earn emotion, respect their own rules, and actually understand pacing, and they manage to do all of that without relying on cheap tricks or blind fan worship. When you compare Sword Art Online to even average storytelling, Its flaws become painfully obvious, and that comparison alone completely exposes how weak it really is. I have to assume that Sword Art Online fans have never seen anything else before, because if they had even a basic point of comparison, they would know how bad this garbage show really is. Anyone who has watched other movies or shows would immediately see how empty, sloppy, and poorly written this series is. Sword Art Online somehow manages to make even genuinely bad shows look like masterpieces by comparison. And the fact that people still defend it just proves how low their standards are. For people who like Sword Art Online, I genuinely have to ask why. What exactly are you getting out of this that you cannot find done better literally anywhere else? Is it the writing, which is full of shortcuts and contradictions? Is it the characters who talk about their feelings instead of earning them? Is it the stakes, which keep shrinking every time the story pretends something matters? Or is it just nostalgia and blind loyalty doing all the heavy lifting? Because taken on its own merits, there is nothing here that justifies the praise, the devotion, or the way fans act like this series is some untouchable masterpiece. Sword Art Online is complete garbage. Every time someone tries to argue otherwise, it just makes them look foolish and desperate. This arc changes nothing. Nothing at all. It does not matter how much you like the characters or how flashy the fights are. None of it makes this franchise good. It is not even close. You cannot convince me that there is a single thing worth saving here. Anyone who thinks otherwise is kidding themselves. They keep shoveling more time, more money, and more effort into this steaming pile of trash while shows that actually have talent, heart, and creativity get canceled without a second thought. It is beyond sad. It is infuriating. Every new season of this nonsense is like a middle finger to anyone who cares about good storytelling. It is a joke. A complete insulting joke. And yet they keep doing it, as if anyone with eyes or a brain would care about this garbage. After this episode is over, I am finally done. Completely done. And then I remember that this nightmare is far from over. There are still countless more arcs, more movies, more of this garbage. And somehow I am forced to keep watching it just to rip it all apart. It never ends. Every time I think I am free, the franchise drags me back in with more nonsense, more pointless drama, more garbage pretending to be entertainment. It is exhausting. It is stupid. And yet here I am, stuck wading through it all just to prove how terrible it really is. It feels like I am a character trapped in a time loop from a terrible movie. Endlessly, over and over, forced to relive the same pointless nonsense again and again. No escape, no relief, just the same garbage repeating itself like it thinks it is clever. Every scene is just another reminder that this franchise has no shame and no end in sight. If I ever saw a sky full of shooting stars, I would be spending every single wish on one thing. Erasing Sword Art Online from existence, not fixing it, not rewriting it, not giving it one good arc. Just wiping it out completely like it never happened. No seasons, no movies, no excuses. The world would lose nothing of value, and the anime genre would instantly be better for it. That is the best use of infinite wishes I can think of. I am still wondering what I did to deserve this. Did I anger some vengeful god like Odysseus did with Poseidon? Because that is the only explanation for being trapped in this endless nightmare of a show. Nothing else makes sense. Every new arc, every stupid plot twist, feels like a punishment from the heavens, a cosmic joke at my expense. It is just endless suffering and torment, and not a single reward for my misery. At least Tantalus was punished for a crime that mattered. Forced to stand in a pool of water beneath a fruit tree. Every attempt to drink or eat was thwarted. Eternal thirst. Eternal hunger. Never satisfying. Never escaping. Total psychological torture wrapped around physical need. And yet he did not have to endure this show. Sword Art Online is a punishment without reason. An endless loop of awfulness and disappointment that somehow expects me to care. I would honestly rather watch Morbius and Madame Web 100 times each than ever watch this show again. At least with those disasters, I might accidentally find something to laugh at. There's unintentional comedy, bad dialogue, and moments so absurd they circle back to being entertaining. This show does not even have that mercy. It is not funny, not clever, not charming. It is just endless boredom and frustration pretending it deserves my time. If this is supposed to be the best arc in Sword Art Online, then I cannot even imagine what I will have to say about the rest. This is the high point. This is as good as it gets. And it is still terrible. If this is the franchise at its peak, then everything else can only sink further into nonsense, boredom, and disappointment. The thought of what is coming next is not exciting. It is horrifying. If this is what the kids are watching these days, then the future of humanity is officially over. People are going to grow up thinking Sword Art Online is the best thing ever. Entire generations will be convinced that endless whining, boring characters, and terrible plots are quality entertainment. Civilization might survive, but taste clearly will not. And the fact that this garbage is shaping young minds is nothing short of tragic. I refuse to believe that Sword Art Online is actually this popular. Please tell me most of the viewers are bots or something, because there's no way so many real people sit through and enjoy this steaming pile of trash. It defies logic, reason, and basic human taste. I would sooner believe the Earth is flat than that this nonsense has that many fans who genuinely think it is good. When people complain about artificial intelligence-generated slop, all I have to do is point them towards Sword Art Online. It is living proof that human-made creations can be far worse than anything artificial intelligence could spit out. At least artificial intelligence has the excuse of being learning. This is deliberate. Someone spent a lot of time, money, and effort to produce this garbage and somehow thought it was worth sharing. It is embarrassing, it is absurd, and it is proof that humans can fail harder than any machine or algorithm ever could. Why did the author think this was a story worth telling? I have read fan fiction that is leagues better than this, and most of it was probably written by bored teenagers in a weekend. Somehow this franchise was presented as entertainment worth millions of dollars, while actual creativity, actual talent gets ignored. It is baffling. It is insulting. And it makes me wonder if the author ever even read their own work. To say that Sword Art Online is the bottom of the barrel would be an insult to barrels. At least barrels have a purpose. At least barrels can hold something. This show holds nothing. It contributes nothing. It entertains no one. It is a hollow, useless mess, and calling it the bottom of the barrel still somehow flatters it. The episode begins with the characters having a barbecue. Of course it does. Every single character is there, even the completely forgettable background ones whose names nobody remembers or cares about. It is clearly meant to be this big heartfelt gathering. A warm moment where the audience is supposed to feel something. Instead, it just comes across as forced, empty, and painfully fake. A hollow attempt at emotional payoff that was never earned, starring characters who barely qualify as characters at all. And this is yet another scene set in the exact same location, the forest house that Kirito and Asuna bought. Instead of giving us a new place or anything remotely fresh to keep things interesting, the show just recycles the same boring, bland setting over and over again. It feels cheap and lazy, like they ran out of ideas and decided to squeeze every last drop out of the one location they already had. Variety clearly is not a priority here. Eugene is there too, which makes absolutely no sense. He should be clearing dungeons, grinding levels, and fighting bosses, not casually hanging around at a barbecue like he has nothing better to do. How do all these so-called top players have endless free time to just chill and socialize? That is not how being the best works in any online game. You do not reach the top by wasting time, skipping progression, and showing up to every cozy group hangout. The writer clearly has no idea how competitive games actually function, and it shows in every scene like this. Also, no offense to anyone named Eugene, but that is an awful name. It does not sound strong, it does not sound cool. It does not sound intimidating in any way. It sounds like the name of a guy who manages a storage unit, not a so-called elite warrior. When I hear it, I do not think of danger or power. I think disappointment. Giving a top player a name like that just kills any threat he is supposed to have. Also, the name does not even fit. Eugene has Greek origins and this game is based on Norse mythology. Why would the author pick a name like Eugene for one of the top players here? It makes no sense. It completely clashes with the setting and kills whatever tone the game is supposed to have. That would be like calling Thor Kevin or naming Odin Brian. It sounds wrong the second you hear it, and it proves the writer was not thinking at all. It is genuinely hilarious how the side characters do not even get a single speaking line. They just stand there like cardboard cutouts, pretending to be part of the scene. I guess the producers did not want to spend the extra money hiring the voice actors again, so the characters did not talk at all. Nothing says quality storytelling like filling the screen with characters who exist purely as background noise. It makes the whole scene feel cheap, lazy, and unfinished. Recon is jealous because Lifa is talking to another guy. And it is embarrassing. He needs to get over it already. He tried confessing his feelings, it did not work. And that should have been the end of it. This sulking, possessive nonsense just makes him look pathetic. She does not owe him anything. She's allowed to talk to whoever she wants. Instead of standing around acting bitter, he should move on and find someone else. This whole bit is childish and annoying, and it adds nothing except secondhand embarrassment. The fact that Lifa would rather be in a romantic relationship with her own brother than with Recon says everything you need to know. That is how little appeal he has. Zero charm. Zero presence. Absolutely no riz at all. When someone would rather choose the most awkward possible option over you, that is not bad luck. That is a personal failure. And instead of accepting that and moving on, Recon just stands there sulking, making it even more obvious why nobody picks him. One player randomly suggests they should go raid the boss on floor 23, and somehow nobody questions it. That would be fine if the show had not already established that they defeated the floor 27 boss in a previous episode. That means the next available boss is on floor 28, not 23. This is basic logic. This is the bare minimum of keeping track of your own story. And yet the show still gets it wrong. It cannot even keep its own narrative straight from one episode to the next. If the writers cannot remember what floor the characters are on, why should anyone else care? The players head into the dungeon, and of course it is the exact same setting we already saw back in Sword Art Online. Once again, nothing is new. Nothing is fresh. The show just drags out another recycled location and pretends it counts as content. Different game, but same hallways, same look, same boredom. It feels like they copied and pasted the environment and hoped nobody would notice. This is not world building. This is reuse disguised as nostalgia. And it is painfully lazy. The trash mobs the players fight are literally the same ones Kirito fought back in Sword Art Online. And those were on a higher floor. So what? Every floor in this game is crawling with the exact same weak, boring enemies. Or did the animators just get lazy and decide to reuse the same assets instead of designing anything new? Either way, it is pathetic. It kills any sense of progression, challenge, or world building. And it makes the game feel like a cheap copy-paste job rather than a living, evolving world. And instead of calling them trash mobs, we should start calling them Sword Art Online mobs instead. Since, Sword Art Online itself is trash. Every weak, boring enemy perfectly reflects the quality of the franchise. Recycled, lazy, and completely forgettable. They might as well have branded the mobs with the logo of the show because nothing else about them is original or worth remembering. Literally, the entire boss fight is skipped. 1 second they are supposed to be battling, and the next, bam, they have defeated the boss. Hard cut. Gone. Who needs an exciting, action-packed fight when you can have endless boring scenes of the characters standing around talking to each other, right? Nothing is thrilling. Nothing is tense. It is all just padded nonsense pretending to be a story, while the only actual action happens off-screen. It is lazy, insulting, and completely robs the audience of any satisfaction. The floor boss is some giant crab creature, and it makes absolutely no sense. It does not belong in this world at all. Giant crabs are not part of traditional Norse mythology. Norse myths are full of gods, giants, dwarves, elves, monsters like Fenrir the Wolf, Jormungandr the World Serpent, and all sorts of terrifying, legendary creatures, but crabs, not a single one. The Poetic Edda and Prose Edda never even hint at anything like this. There are countless amazing, awe-inspiring creatures in Norse mythology that could have been the floor boss. Real monsters with actual history and lore, ones that would have made the battle feel epic and meaningful. But the author? No. Instead of drawing from rich mythology, they tossed in a giant crab like a child playing with a toy, completely destroying any sense of world building or atmosphere. It is lazy, it is ridiculous, and it makes the show look embarrassingly clueless about the very mythology it claims to borrow from. And the players absolutely did not need a party of 49 people to defeat this boss. Not even close. So why would the show specifically mention that exact number as if it somehow matters? Both of the boss fights we have seen so far did not require anywhere near that many players to win. It is a completely arbitrary detail, thrown in to sound epic or strategic, when in reality it exposes how little thought went into the mechanics of this world. The writers clearly just made up a number and hoped nobody would notice that it makes no sense whatsoever. And of course, not a single character dies during this boss fight. Predictable. These floor bosses are supposed to be difficult. Dangerous challenges that test the skill and teamwork of the players. But when not a single player even comes close to dying, it completely ruins the tension. There are no stakes, no risk, no sense of accomplishment. It turns what should be an intense, thrilling battle into a completely pointless scene where everyone walks away unscathed. And the challenge might as well not exist. It is lazy, boring, and insulting to anyone who actually likes action or strategy. Players in this game already respawn when they die. There is no real-life risk like in the original Sword Art Online. And yet the author is apparently too scared to actually kill anyone off. Every dangerous fight is just meaningless pantomime, because the characters know they are untouchable. There is no tension, no stakes, no weight to anything that happens. It is like watching a watered-down version of a fight scene where failure is literally impossible, and it makes the show feel cowardly, lazy, and insultingly safe. And how is the floor boss just sitting there, available for the characters to take on whenever they feel like it? The top guilds should be busy clearing the floors, fighting the bosses, and securing their territory. These bosses are not supposed to be freely available like a vending machine. No one in their right mind would let just anyone stroll in and fight them. But of course, the show ignores all logic and world building just to let the main characters have a convenient battle. It is lazy, unbelievable, and makes the entire game world feel like a joke. In one of the previous episodes, we already saw another guild that specializes in killing floor bosses, and the players had to fight them just to get a chance at the boss. So how has that other guild not already defeated this one? There are no private instances in this game. Everything is open world. Did the guild just give up? Did they forget to show up? Or did the writers just not think this through? The logic makes no sense, and it completely shatters any illusion that this world has rules or consequences. It is sloppy, lazy, and insulting to anyone trying to follow the story. Why are the players celebrating like defeating this low-level floor boss is some kind of huge accomplishment? Back in Sword Art Online, Kirito soloed floor bosses that were far higher level and actually challenging. This is a complete regression. It makes no sense. It would be like saving the entire universe in one movie. And then in the sequel, the heroes are cheering because they managed to save a single town. The show treats meaningless victories like epic triumphs, and it makes the characters and the story look completely pathetic. The characters already had Kirito on the team, so why are they even bothering to do anything at all? They might as well just stand there and watch him solo the floor boss alone. He is ridiculously overpowered, and he has the best weapon in the game, the Holy Sword Excalibur. He could probably defeat the boss in one hit without even trying. The rest of the team is completely unnecessary, which makes their presence feel pointless and the scene even more absurd. It is like the show is pretending teamwork matters, but everyone watching knows Kirito could handle it blindfolded. The boss did not even drop anything, not a single reward. Nobody got a bonus item, nothing. That is terrible, lazy, amateur-level game design. Bosses in any decent game are supposed to drop epic, powerful loot that makes the fight feel worth it. Instead, we get absolutely nothing, like the writers could not be bothered to give the players any sense of accomplishment. It makes the whole fight feel pointless, boring, and insulting to anyone who actually cares about games or storytelling. We move to the real world, and Asuna is attending classes with Yuki watching. Who cares about this boring, mundane school nonsense? Sword Art Online is supposed to be about adventure, danger, and epic battles inside a virtual world. Not watching characters sit in classrooms and pretend like homework matters. These filler scenes add nothing, drain the energy out of the story, and make the show feel painfully slow and pointless. It is completely irrelevant to the parts anyone actually wants to watch. Why even call this show Sword Art Online when it has nothing to do with Sword Art Online anymore? The name is a complete lie. There are no real stakes, no deadly virtual reality survival, and barely any actual sword fighting. It pretends to be part of the original premise, but everything about it has drifted so far from the core concept that the title feels meaningless. It is misleading, lazy, and insulting to anyone who actually remembers what made the original show interesting. The characters fly past some mountains in the game, and they look exactly like the Hallelujah Mountains from the Avatar movies. The show cannot even come up with its own original environments. It is so lazy it just rips off ideas from other media and expects the audience not to notice. World building, creativity, originality? Forget it. Everything about this virtual world feels recycled, derivative, and painfully uninspired. Sword Art Online is the most unoriginal story imaginable. It does not create anything new. It just borrows, copies, or outright steals ideas from other far better stories and then tries to pass them off as its own. The show is a patchwork of cliches and recycled concepts slapped together with zero imagination, and somehow people pretend it is entertaining. It is lazy, shameless, and completely hollow. And this setting does not even fit the game world. The Hallelujah Mountains are from Pandora, a fictional alien planet, and this game is supposedly based on Norse mythology. That is not just a minor detail. It is completely out of place. It makes no sense, breaks immersion, and proves that the writers have zero respect for the world they are trying to build. Instead of creating something inspired by Norse legends, they just copy-paste from another franchise like they were too lazy to think for themselves. It is sloppy, ridiculous, and painfully obvious. And sure, let the characters fly now. Because why not? But never in the dungeons, never during boss fights, never in duels. Anywhere flying would actually be useful, strategic, or make a difference. Totally off limits. The game conveniently bans it when it might matter. And then suddenly the characters can soar through the skies in pointless, empty moments that add nothing. It is inconsistent, lazy, and makes the world feel completely arbitrary. Rules exist only when the writers feel like it, and everything else is just sloppy hand-waving. The game design of this fictional game is absolutely terrible. If Altheme Online were real, nobody in their right mind would play this broken mess. The mechanics make no sense, the rules are inconsistent, and the challenges are either impossible or completely pointless. There is no balance, no logic, and zero thought put into how an actual game should function. It is lazy, frustrating, and insulting to anyone who has ever played a well-designed game. Asuna and the Sleeping Knights defeat the Floor 29 boss as well. And once again, how does that even make sense? All the players in the game are supposedly fighting over the chance to battle the boss. Yet somehow this guild breezes through it without anyone noticing or interfering. There are no private instances, so logically the fight should have been crowded, chaotic, and dangerous. Instead, the show just handwaves it, breaking its own rules and making the world feel completely meaningless. It is sloppy, lazy, and completely destroys any sense of consistency. And of course, they do not even show the boss fight at all. We are just supposed to imagine it, apparently. Because watching the actual battle would require effort, creativity, or animation that the show clearly could not be bothered with. Instead, we get a meaningless cutscene that says, "They won," and that is it. No tension, no excitement, no skill on display, just a lazy, insulting shrug in place of a real fight. It is ridiculous, frustrating, and completely unworthy of the premise. And why did the show make such a big deal about the characters defeating the Floor 27 boss? Only to have them breeze through 2 more floor bosses without breaking a sweat? It completely undermines any sense of danger, achievement, or progression. What was supposed to feel epic and hard-fought is instantly rendered meaningless. The stakes evaporate, the tension disappears, and the audience is left wondering why they should even care about these battles at all. It is lazy, insulting, and completely destroys whatever drama the show tried to build. There's a duel tournament, and Kirito somehow loses to Yuki. Except we already know the truth. Kirito is never actually losing. In a previous episode, he let Yuki win because he was not trying. This is exactly the same situation here. Kirito cannot genuinely lose unless the writers want him to, and they clearly never do. Every so-called defeat is fake, meaningless, and predictable. It turns the tournament into a joke, robs any tension from the scene, and makes the whole event feel pointless. And I am pretty sure this is the same Coliseum setting where Kirito fought Heathcliff back in Sword Art Online. Once again, the show is just recycling another location. Nothing new, nothing original, just the same old scenery shoved back into the story. It is lazy, uninspired, and makes the world feel completely recycled. The setting does not even fit. There are no Colosseums in Norse mythology. The architecture, the design, everything about this place clashes completely with the world the show claims to be building. It makes no sense, breaks immersion, and proves the writers have zero understanding or respect for the mythology they are supposedly adapting. It is lazy, ridiculous, and completely undermines the setting. The Colosseum is a Roman structure, built for gladiator fights and public spectacles in ancient Rome. It has absolutely nothing to do with Scandinavia, Norse gods, elves, or giants. The architecture, the purpose, the entire concept is completely out of place. Norse mythology never had massive stone amphitheaters with tiered seating. Their buildings were longhouses, wooden temples, or fortifications, things that actually fit the culture. Sticking a Colosseum here is just lazy world building. It is as if the animators saw a giant arena and thought, sure, why not? Nobody will notice. It gets worse. The Colosseum exists for organized public entertainment, watching battles for fun. In Norse myth, combat is epic, chaotic, and tied to quests or wars, not some spectator sport with cheering crowds. Dropping it into Alfheim Online is like planting a Starbucks in Valhalla. It makes zero sense and instantly ruins immersion. Accuracy has never been a priority for this show. They just throw in whatever they think looks cool, completely ignoring the world they supposedly built or the mythology they claim to be inspired by. Norse myths? Sure, if by Norse you mean giant crabs and colosseums. The show does not care about consistency, logic, or even the tiniest shred of plausibility. It only cares about flashy visuals and pretending that random nonsense counts as world building. It is like watching someone paint over a blueprint with glitter and call it architecture. The theme, the setting, the rules of the world, all tossed out the window the moment the animators think it will look dramatic on screen. Nothing makes sense, nothing fits, and yet the show acts like it is revolutionary. It is lazy, sloppy, and insulting to anyone with a brain. And why is Kratos not using Excalibur during the duel? What is the point of getting the best sword in the entire game and then barely using it? It makes no sense. He has the ultimate weapon and the writers act like it does not exist. Every moment he ignores it is a wasted opportunity for excitement, tension, or showing off just how overpowered he is. It is lazy writing, completely illogical, and makes the whole duel feel far less impressive than it should be. If this were a real game, a player would be using the best weapon they have. There would be no reason not to, unless there is a massive upkeep cost or something. Every serious player would equip their most powerful gear to gain any advantage. But of course, Kirito is already overpowered enough that the writers do not bother letting him actually use it most of the time. He is too busy being dramatic or letting the plot dictate the action instead of playing like a competent gamer. It makes no sense, breaks immersion, and is yet another example of lazy storytelling. Kirito is also not dual-wielding. The show deliberately limits his abilities just to make Yuki seem more impressive. If Kirito were actually going all out, he would destroy her without breaking a sweat. Sword Art Online constantly nerfs its most powerful character whenever the plot needs someone else to shine, which is lazy, inconsistent, and completely undermines any sense of stakes or credibility. It is obvious favoritism disguised as tension, and it is painfully frustrating to watch. Kirito tries to fly during the duel, but then time is up. Why not fly from the start? There's no reason to wait. It makes absolutely no sense. If flying gives him an advantage, he should be doing it the entire time, not waiting for some convenient plot moment to suddenly activate it. This is the kind of lazy, inconsistent writing that kills any tension or strategy in the scene and makes the duel feel completely arbitrary. Why is there a time limit for the duel? Why not just let the fight go on until one player actually wins? The show does not bother to explain, of course, because logic has never been a priority. Instead, we are supposed to pretend that an arbitrary timer somehow makes sense in a game where death is temporary and players respawn at will. It is just another example of Sword Art Online slapping on a rule for dramatic effect without thinking it through. The result is a fight that feels forced, rushed, and completely unsatisfying. The duel could have been exciting, strategic, or tense, but instead it is artificially constrained, like someone cutting off a meal mid-bite and expecting you to feel full. It makes no sense, it adds nothing to the story, and it is just another lazy shortcut this show loves to take. And how did Kirito even figure out that Yuki was full-time in this world? It is not like she openly announced it or left obvious clues everywhere. The show expects us to believe he just magically knows, because the writers needed a convenient way to move the plot forward. It makes no sense, feels completely forced, and once again highlights how little thought goes into consistency or logic in this story. Asuna has been getting good grades in school and shows her mom. Why should anyone care about this? It adds nothing to the story, no tension, no excitement, and no reason to watch. At this point, the show might as well be renamed The Life of a Rich Girl because apparently her academic performance is more important than the actual adventure, action, or stakes that Sword Art Online is supposed to be about. It is boring, pointless filler that completely drains the energy from the series. Who cares if Asuna is getting good grades or not? She's already rich, can coast through life, and will never have to worry about money. Her perfect GPA is completely irrelevant, yet the show treats it like some dramatic achievement. It would actually make sense if she were struggling to make it into a good college, working hard for a future she had to earn, but no, instead we get a rich girl excelling at school like it somehow matters. This is just another example of the show trying to manufacture tension and growth where there is none. The academic success of Asuna adds nothing to the story, contributes nothing to her character, and yet the writers insist on acting like it is meaningful. It is so shallow and pointless that it is almost laughable. Who is seriously watching this show just to find out if Asuna got good grades in school or not? Really, who? It is completely irrelevant to the story, the characters, or anything that actually matters. Sword Art Online is supposed to be about surviving high-stakes virtual death games, not celebrating the perfect GPA of a rich girl. Yet somehow the show thinks we care about this mundane nonsense, as if knowing her test scores is some kind of thrilling plot point. It is lazy, pointless filler designed to pad out the runtime while pretending to give the story depth. It contributes absolutely nothing to the arc, adds zero tension, and makes the audience feel like they are watching a school drama instead of a high-stakes adventure. This is exactly the kind of meaningless, trivial detail that drags Sword Art Online from bad to insulting. The girls take a vacation to Kyoto. And once again, what does this have to do with Sword Art Online? Did I accidentally click on the wrong show? There is no connection to the game, no stakes, no adventure, just random sightseeing. It is filler disguised as plot, lazy, and completely irrelevant. Watching this makes you wonder if the writers even remember what the show is supposed to be about. Why would I care about seeing these girls go on vacation to Kyoto? Seriously, what does this have to do with anything? It is just padding, filler meant to make the episode feel longer while contributing nothing to the plot. The characters are the stakes. Sword Art Online is supposed to be about high-stakes virtual death games, boss fights, and survival, not sightseeing and awkward tourist shots. The show treats this like a fun, bonding moment, but it comes across as pointless fluff. Nobody needed to see this, nobody asked for this, and yet here it is, taking up valuable screen time while the real story, if you can even call it that, suffers. It is lazy storytelling at its finest, a distraction masquerading as character development. And it makes the arc even more unbearable, and why even go to Kyoto? They already live in Japan. Going somewhere else in the same country is not thrilling, it is just boring. If the show actually wanted to give this vacation a hint of excitement, maybe the characters could have traveled somewhere exotic or at least slightly interesting. Instead, we get the most mundane, predictable tourist trip imaginable, like the writers just opened a map and randomly picked a location. It is filler disguised as story development, a pointless detour that does nothing to advance the plot or reveal anything about the characters. Sword Art Online is supposed to be about danger, strategy, and survival, not sightseeing for the sake of making the episode longer. This is the kind of lazy padding that makes you question why you are still watching. And let us not forget, this is an animated show. It is not like they had to fly the crew out to another country or deal with logistics to film this scene. All they had to do was draw it. They can pick any location they want. So there's absolutely no excuse for making it so painfully dull and pointless. If you're going to waste time on a vacation scene, at least make it interesting. But no, the animators just scribbled some mountains, temples, and cherry blossoms, slapped the characters on top, and called it a day. It is filler for the sake of filler, pretending to be meaningful when it adds nothing to the story, the stakes, or the characters. The effort is minimal, the payoff is zero, and the whole thing just screams lazy padding disguised as plot development. Several months later, Asuna gets a message from the doctor of Yuki saying her condition has deteriorated and asking her to come immediately. And the show somehow speedruns through months of story, skipping all the meaningful moments, yet still finds time to waste on pointless filler. The pacing makes no sense. Important events are rushed or ignored, while trivial, irrelevant scenes get dragged out. It is sloppy, disrespectful to the story, and completely fails to make the audience care about anything that happens. And maybe her condition deteriorated because of full diving for 3 years straight. As we saw in the first arc, full diving for just 2 years was already pushing the limits of the human body. So now we are supposed to believe that spending an extra year plugged into a game is perfectly fine for her mind and body. Give me a break. The show treats this like it is no big deal, glossing over the fact that continuous full dives for years would be physically and mentally exhausting, if not outright dangerous. Instead of exploring any of that realistically, the writers just handwave it and move on. Because who cares about consistency or plausibility when you can manufacture drama at will? It is lazy storytelling dressed up as tragic realism, and it makes the entire premise feel even more absurd. The title card appears, and the episode is called Mother's Rosario, which is already the name of the arc. Why bother coming up with a unique, memorable title for the episode when you can just reuse the same one as the arc? It is lazy, unimaginative, and completely uninspired. It is the kind of thing that screams the writers are phoning it in, and have zero interest in adding any flair or creativity to the show. Asuna runs to the hospital, but if this is supposed to be so urgent and she is rich, why not have someone drive her there? A car would be far faster than jogging through the streets like a normal person. Instead, we are supposed to take this dramatic moment seriously, even though it makes zero sense. It is illogical, forced, and just another example of the show expecting the audience to ignore basic common sense for the sake of fake tension. And why did Asuna have to change into her schoolgirl uniform? She's not going to school, and this is supposedly urgent. She should have rushed to the hospital in whatever she was wearing instead of wasting time on a pointless costume change. It makes no sense, kills any urgency, and is yet another example of the show prioritizing style over logic. It is frustrating, silly, and completely undermines the stakes of the scene. The doctor informs Asuna that the heart of Yuki has stopped. They were able to get it going again with defibrillation and medication, but if it happens a second time, there could be serious consequences. And yet, the show rushes through this life-or-death moment as if it is just another plot point to get past. The drama is undermined by the speed and casual handling, making it hard to feel any real tension or fear for the character. It is rushed, melodramatic, and completely wastes what should be a powerful, emotional moment. The show just expects the audience to feel sad even though it has done absolutely nothing to earn it. It rushes through emotions, skips character development, and throws a tragic moment at us without building any connection or weight. You are supposed to cry because the script says so, not because you actually care. It is manipulative, lazy, and completely disrespectful to the intelligence of the audience. Asuna does not understand why this is happening since Yuki seemed fine. The doctor replies that the condition of Yuki has been touch and go all along. She cannot beat this, but she keeps fighting anyway. So why is Asuna acting so surprised? This is basic information we already know. The show expects us to treat her shock as meaningful drama, but it comes off as forced, repetitive, and completely unnecessary. It is lazy writing and makes the characters feel frustratingly unaware for no reason. The doctor mentions that Yuki is 15, but in a previous episode he said, she was born in May 2011, since it is March 2026, that would actually make her 14. She would not turn 15 until May 2026. This is a basic, elementary level mistake, and it is frustrating that the show cannot even keep its own timeline straight. It is sloppy, careless, and yet another example of the writers treating the story as an afterthought rather than paying attention to simple consistency. The doctor mentions that the clinical trials with the medicuboid have caused Yuki an unimaginable amount of pain. But wait, he said earlier that the medicuboid is supposed to make the muscles completely numb, making it unnecessary to use anesthetics. So which is it? Is she supposed to feel pain or not? The show contradicts itself, ignores its own rules, and expects the audience to just accept it without question. It is sloppy, inconsistent, and completely undermines any credibility the story might have had. Asuna calls Yuki Zekken, which is obviously meant to sound cool and intimidating. Except in real life. Zekken is just the bib a competitor wears to show their name or number during a race or martial arts tournament. That is right, what the show thinks is some epic, intimidating Cody name is literally just a sports name tag. Instead of sounding powerful, it comes across as ridiculous, awkward, and completely unearned. The writers clearly have no idea how embarrassing it actually sounds outside of anime, and it makes the whole attempt at cool feel laughably forced. And just because Yuki is a strong swordswoman in the game does not mean she is strong in real life. The show is constantly trying to make it seem like her in-game skill automatically translates into real-world strength or resilience. It makes no sense. Being good at a video game or virtual combat does not give anyone physical power or endurance in reality. The writers are forcing drama and admiration based on a completely meaningless connection, and it comes across as lazy and completely unconvincing. Asuna understands that Yuki wants to go back to the virtual world one last time. The doctor allows Yuki to use the metacuboid again. Asuna will go next door to log into the game with an Amusphere. What was the point of this scene? Yuki could have just been in the game already and Asuna could have logged in and joined her. There was no reason for Asuna to come to the hospital at all. The doctor could have simply explained in the message that Yuki did not have much time left. Instead, the show wastes time on an unnecessary setup that adds nothing to the story and makes the pacing feel slow and clunky. Asuna meets Yuki at the place where they first dueled. Yet again, the show is recycling another location. Nothing new, nothing original, just the same scenery shoved back into the story as if it is somehow meaningful. It is lazy, uninspired, and completely predictable. The world feels recycled and boring because the writers cannot be bothered to create a fresh environment for even the most important moments. Yuki makes a scroll containing her original sword skill and gives it to Asuna. Asuna does not want to take it, but why not? It is not like Yuki is going to use it anymore, so she might as well accept it. Having Asuna decline the offer is clearly meant to make her seem noble or selfless, but it just comes across as stubborn, pointless, and melodramatic. It adds nothing to the story and only slows down the pacing while pretending to be meaningful. Original sword skills are still a dumb game design mechanic. Everything in the game should be obtainable by everyone. If players can create original items or abilities that nobody else can get, it is completely unfair and breaks any sense of balance. It turns the game into a playground for a few privileged characters and makes all other players irrelevant. It is lazy, poorly thought out, and just another example of the show ignoring logic for the sake of making certain characters look special. It is just as stupid as having unique skills back in Sword Art Online. The writer clearly has not learned anything or improved from past mistakes. Giving a player something unique in an online game is not fair. It creates an unbalanced world where some characters are overpowered simply because the story demands it. And it completely undermines any sense of challenge or competition. It is lazy, unfair, and shows a complete disregard for basic game design logic. And where did Yuki even get this original sword skill from? If players can just create their own sword skills, then what is stopping someone from making an even more powerful one? How does this mechanic even work? The show does not bother to explain any of it, of course, because that would take actual effort. It is lazy, inconsistent, and makes the game mechanics completely nonsensical. The writers clearly just wanted a convenient way to make Yuki look special without thinking through the consequences or logic. And what if a player does not even use a sword? Are they still able to create an original sword skill? There are several other weapons in this game like daggers, bows, hammers, katanas, and more. The show does not explain any of this, of course. It just expects the audience to accept this vague, broken mechanic without question. It is lazy, inconsistent, and makes the game world feel completely arbitrary. The writers clearly do not care about logic or balance, only about giving certain characters convenient advantages. Yuki suddenly collapses because she feels weak all of a sudden. But why would she feel weak inside the game? Being weak in real life should not affect her virtual body at all. The show expects us to take this seriously, even though it completely ignores the rules it has set for the virtual world. It is illogical, forced, and yet another example of lazy storytelling where the writers bend the mechanics just to create drama. Yuki says that she is not in any pain or anything. So why did the doctor claim that the clinical trials with the metacuboid caused her an unimaginable amount of pain? The show contradicts itself within the same episode. One moment she is suffering horribly, the next she is completely fine, and the audience is supposed to just accept it. It is sloppy, inconsistent, and makes the entire plot feel meaningless. The writers clearly do not care about logic or continuity. The original sword skill is called Mother's Rosario, which is why the arc has the same name. But what does it even mean? Mother is obvious. But Rosario literally means a rosary, the string of prayer beads used in Catholic devotion. It is supposed to be dramatic or powerful, but instead the name is just two words slapped together with no real connection to swords, fighting, or the story at all. It makes zero sense in the context of a virtual Norse mythology-themed game. The writers clearly picked it because it sounds fancy, not because it actually fits. It comes across as awkward, meaningless, and painfully forced. And why even name the entire arc after this original sword skill? That would be like calling the first arc dual-wielding. Yuki barely even uses this skill, yet the show treats it like some legendary, world-changing ability. It is completely overhyped, unnecessary, and makes the arc feel like it is trying too hard to be dramatic. The title is misleading, the focus is misplaced, and it only highlights how little thought went into giving the story real significance. Sword Art Online has never been good with names. Fairy Dance, Phantom Bullet, and now Mother's Rosario. None of these names make any sense or actually fit the story they are supposed to represent. They sound like the writers just threw together random words that seemed cool or dramatic without thinking about logic, context, or meaning. It is lazy, sloppy, and makes the series feel like it is trying to be epic while barely putting any effort into even the basics. Asuna thanks Yuki and promises to take good care of the original sword skill. She even vows to pass it on to someone else before she dies. Give me a break. The show is trying way too hard to seem emotional. It piles on sentiment like it automatically makes the audience care, even though there is no real weight behind it. It is forced, melodramatic, and exhausting to watch, turning what should be a meaningful moment into a painfully obvious manipulation. Who even knows if Alfheim Online will still be running by the time Asuna dies? This dialogue is way too sappy and over the top. It is trying so hard to be heartfelt that it ends up feeling completely artificial. The show drags out sentiment that has no real stakes or urgency, and it is exhausting to sit through. It is melodrama for the sake of melodrama, not genuine emotion. Asuna tells Yuki that this original sword skill will live on until the end of time. But that makes no sense. There should be better sword skills released as time goes on. If this is supposed to be the best original sword skill in the entire game and nothing ever beats it, then the game is broken and the story is ridiculous. The writers are pretending this skill is eternally special, but it just highlights lazy design and a complete lack of thought about progression or balance in the game world. The other Sleeping Knights members come to comfort Yuki. They talk about passing over to the other side and waiting for each other. Oh my gods. Can the show please stop piling on the forced, over-the-top sentimentality? It is trying so hard to be emotional that it feels completely fake and exhausting. Instead of genuine grief or connection, it comes across as melodrama cranked up to 11 with zero subtlety or impact. The show does absolutely nothing to earn any of this. I honestly do not even remember the names of the other Sleeping Knights members, and yet we are supposed to feel some deep emotional connection to them. There is no development, no screen time, and no reason to care. The writers just dump them into a sad moment and expect the audience to cry on cue. It is lazy, manipulative, and completely fails to create any real impact. All of the characters start crying, and the viewers are supposed to cry along with them. Except I do not have any tears to shed because I could not care less. The show has done nothing to make me invested in these characters or their drama. It is trying to manufacture emotion instead of actually earning it. And it comes across as fake, hollow, and exhausting to watch. The writer is clearly not skilled enough to create a thrilling or exciting story, so he thinks that simply trying to manipulate the audience into crying will make the show meaningful. It does not. Manufactured emotion cannot replace actual tension, stakes, or good storytelling. The attempts at pulling at the heartstrings fall flat, feel forced, and only highlight how lazy and incompetent the writing really is. The funny part is that a lot of dumb people are probably buying into this nonsense and crying alongside the characters. They are so unintelligent that they got tricked into feeling emotions the show did not earn. Instead of recognizing how hollow and manipulative the writing is, they are applauding it, mistaking cheap, forced melodrama for genuine storytelling. It is both ridiculous and a little painful to think about. Kirito and the other characters show up as well. Why would they care so much about Yuki? They barely even know her. That is the problem with Sword Art Online. The show acts like all these characters are lifelong friends when they literally just met like 2 months ago or something. It tries to force emotional connections that make no sense, and it ends up feeling completely fake and contrived. The writers rely on manufactured friendship instead of building real relationships, and it is painfully obvious. And how did they even know to show up here at this exact time? Is Kirito some all-knowing, omnipotent god that can predict the future and coordinate everyone perfectly? Of course not. The writers just expect the audience to swallow this absurd convenience without a second thought. It is lazy, insulting, and completely destroys any sense of realism or tension. Every so-called emotional moment is propped up by these ridiculous coincidences, and the show acts like we are too stupid to notice. It is sloppy storytelling at its absolute worst, pretending to be dramatic while relying entirely on dumb luck and fan service. Thousands of other players show up as well. Asuna somehow let them know, but when did she have time to do that? She literally logged into the game only after learning that Yuki did not have much time left. The logistics make zero sense. The show expects us to ignore this huge gap in logic and just go along with the scene. It is lazy, poorly thought out. And another example of the writers stacking coincidences instead of telling a story that actually makes sense. And even if Asuna somehow had a way to inform thousands of players what was happening, why would any of them actually care enough to show up? They should be busy minding their own business and doing their own things. But of course, these are not real characters. They are just background props who exist to pad the scene, make the moment feel bigger than it is, and give the illusion of emotional weight. The writers treat them as nothing more than disposable set dressing, and it is lazy, insulting, and completely obvious to anyone paying attention. These random players do not even know Yuki. Why would they waste their time coming to see her? I do not go to funerals for people I do not know. And how does the game not lag like crazy with thousands of people all crowded in the same spot at once? The show expects us to ignore all of this and just accept the scene as emotional and moving. It is completely unrealistic, lazy, and shows zero understanding of how games or crowds actually work. The writers just wanted a dramatic moment and threw logic out the window. Instead of making this a quiet, heartfelt scene with a small group of characters, the show had to throw in thousands of random players to try and make it seem like a bigger deal than it really is. It turns what should be intimate and emotional into a chaotic, meaningless spectacle. The added crowd does nothing but distract and cheapen the moment, proving once again that the writers rely on flashy numbers and fake drama instead of actually telling a good story. It is lazy, hollow, and completely misses the point. Imagine if the funeral scene in Avengers Endgame had thousands of random extras shoved into it. It would completely ruin the moment. That scene worked because it was small, quiet, and focused on the people who actually knew Tony Stark. Sword Art Online does the exact opposite. Instead of restraint, it throws in crowds of nobodies to fake importance and scale. It mistakes quantity for meaning and noise for emotion. The result is not powerful or moving. It is loud, hollow, and embarrassing. It is a dumb scene, and yet it expects the audience to clap like trained seals. No thought, no standards, just react on command. The show waves some sad music and a crowd shot in front of you, and assumes that is enough. Do not question it. Do not think about it. Just applaud and call it powerful. That is not storytelling, that is conditioning. And sure, in real life, players in online games sometimes hold online funerals for someone who passes away. But those are small, intimate events where a tight-knit community gathers to honor their friend or clanmate. Thousands of random players do not just show up out of nowhere. The show turns this into a massive, crowded spectacle, completely ignoring reality and common sense, just to make the moment seem bigger and more dramatic. It is absurd, unrealistic. And yet another example of Sword Art Online prioritizing forced spectacle over logic or believable storytelling. Asuna says that Yuki is the strongest and most powerful player the world has ever seen. Kirito is right there. Is the show seriously trying to claim that Yuki is more powerful than Kirito? Give me a break. Without Kirito holding back the other guild, the Sleeping Knights would not even have had the chance to fight the Floor 27 boss. The statement is laughably overblown, completely ignores the reality of the story, and makes the show feel even more desperate to hype characters who do not deserve it. And even if Yuki was somehow the strongest player in the game, most people still would not care. Do you know who the old knight is? No? Well, he was a RuneScape player who was among the very best, constantly battling for rank 1. He supposedly passed away from cancer, and yet I bet most RuneScape players would not even know who he is. The show acts like the in-game skill of Yuki alone should make her universally legendary and revered. But in reality, being the best in a game does not automatically earn fame or emotional investment from thousands of strangers. It is unrealistic, overdramatic, and yet another example of the show forcing significance where none exists. Asuna mentions that there will never be anyone else like Yuki again. Well, of course there will not be. Yuki is only so powerful because she was continuously full diving for 3 whole years. Normal people cannot do that. They have jobs, lives outside of the game, families, responsibilities. Acting like her skill is some magical, unattainable gift makes zero sense in the context of a real online game. The show pretends this is awe-inspiring, but it is really just highlighting how unrealistic and poorly thought out the story is. And I doubt that is even true. There are probably plenty of terminally ill people in the world who will use the Medicuboid. So there very well could be someone like Yuki in the future. The show pretends she is one of a kind and untouchable, but that is just lazy exaggeration. Reality does not work that way, and pretending it does only makes the story feel naive and overdramatic. All the players are praying for Yuki. They hope that her next journey will be to a place as wonderful as this. Oh my gods! Can the show please stop cranking the sentimentality up to 11? It is trying so hard to be emotional that it feels completely fake. The moment is so overcooked and manipulative that it is exhausting to watch instead of actually moving. This comes across as more laughable than emotional. The show is trying way too hard to force feelings onto the audience. Instead of letting the moment develop naturally, it piles on exaggerated gestures, crying, and melodrama, expecting us to automatically care. The result is ridiculous, over the top, and completely misses the mark. It is manipulation dressed up as emotion, and it is exhausting to sit through. And Alfheim Online is a terrible game with awful mechanics. Asuna hoping that Yuki will go to a place as wonderful as this is more of a joke than a heartfelt moment. The game world itself is broken, unfair, and poorly designed, so pretending it can be some magical paradise is absurd. The show tries to make the setting feel meaningful and emotional, but it just highlights how hollow and ridiculous the entire scene really is. Yuki wonders what the point of her being born was since she was meant to die. But everyone is going to die someday. So what exactly is the meaning of this line of dialogue? The show treats it like a profound, heartbreaking revelation, but it is really just meaningless melodrama. It tries to manufacture tragedy out of something that is inevitable for every human being, making the moment feel forced, shallow, and utterly unconvincing. After all this time, Yuki says she realizes she might not have done much. But she is glad she got to live because these last few moments were the best ever. It is meant to sound deep and touching, but it just feels hollow and forced. The show rushes through her entire life and then expects this one line to suddenly carry emotional weight. It feels like a cheap attempt at meaning, as if saying something sad automatically makes it profound. Instead of feeling earned, it comes across as shallow and manipulative, like the writers are begging the audience to feel something that the story never properly built. Yuki is happy that she got to end her journey in the arms of someone she loves. Let me remind you that Asuna and Yuki literally met each other 2 months ago. It is March 2026, and they met in January 2026. The show tries to make it feel like a lifelong bond, but it is completely unbelievable. It acts like they have this deep, unbreakable connection when in reality they barely know each other. The emotional impact is forced, hollow, and painfully manipulative, relying entirely on the audience swallowing a relationship that makes zero sense. The title of the 5th episode, The End of the Journey, would work much better here. Calling it Mother's Rosario instead makes no sense and feels completely arbitrary. It is another example of the show choosing style over clarity or meaning. Pretending a fancy-sounding name adds weight when it really just highlights lazy, sloppy writing. Asuna promises that she will see Yuki again someday in some other place. The show keeps trying to pile on the sentiment like more words automatically make a scene more emotional. It is forced, over the top, and exhausting. Instead of letting the moment breathe or feel earned, it keeps shoving dramatic lines in our faces. treating the audience like we will automatically care just because the characters say we should. And why does the show not even address the option of uploading the consciousness of Yuki into the virtual world like Keiba Akihiko did? The series already introduced that idea, so pretending it does not exist now feels incredibly convenient. Instead of grappling with its own established concepts, the story just ignores them because they would complicate the forced tragedy. It is not thoughtful or respectful storytelling. It is the writers quietly sweeping an inconvenient possibility under the rug so the emotional ending can play out exactly the way they want. Logic be damned. It is hilarious how Yuki sees her sister instead of Asuna. Asuna was just a stand-in for her after her sister passed away. The show tries to make this seem emotional and touching, but it comes across as ridiculous and confusing. Instead of a heartfelt connection between the two main characters, it feels like a forced placeholder moment that makes zero sense and only highlights how manipulative and sloppy the writing really is. Yuki passes away and her virtual avatar closes her eyes. But why would it? She is just a digital representation in a game. Avatars do not magically know when their player dies in real life. The show treats it like this is some profound emotional moment, but it is completely absurd and illogical. It is another example of forced sentimentality shoehorned in without any thought for consistency or realism, expecting the audience to feel something that the story never actually earned. The show tries to make this seem like a big emotional moment, but we are literally never going to see or hear about Yuki again, apart from some contrived scenes where she appears as a ghost or some nonsense like that. All the built-up drama is pointless because it has no lasting impact. The writers pile on sentiment like it matters, but in reality, it is fleeting, hollow, and entirely disposable. It is emotional manipulation dressed up as significance, and it fails spectacularly. Yuki is nothing but a plot device. She was always meant to die from the start, and any smart viewer could see that coming from a mile away. So when it finally happens, you do not feel sad. You feel bored, frustrated, and annoyed at how predictable and manipulative the story is. The show tries to manufacture heartbreak, but because her death was telegraphed from the beginning and she was never treated as a real character, it lands as hollow, lazy, and infuriating instead of emotional. It would have been a lot more interesting if the show actually let Yuki live and explored her character in depth, instead of turning her into a disposable plot device. They could have shown her growing, forming real relationships, and facing genuine challenges, but instead we get a rushed, predictable tragedy. The writers chose the easy, manipulative route and completely wasted any potential for meaningful storytelling. People with AIDS in real life do not automatically die from it, and it is not guaranteed. With modern medicine and proper medical care, people with HIV or AIDS can live long, healthy lives. They can manage the virus, avoid progressing to the late stages, and even live decades beyond their diagnosis. But I guess the show has enough characters already. So the author decided Yuki was just a disposable plot device and did not want to waste any more time developing her story. Instead of exploring her life, her struggles, or her potential, they rushed her out to manufacture a predictable tragedy. It is lazy, insensitive, and yet another example of the show valuing cheap drama over real storytelling. Also, it is funny how Yuki only gave Asuna her original sword skill. What about all of her other items, weapons, and skills? Are those just magically disappearing now? The show expects us to treat this one skill as some ultimate precious legacy, while completely ignoring everything else she worked for. It is illogical, inconsistent, and highlights just how lazily the writers are handling her character and the game world. Everything is designed purely for forced emotional impact, not for any kind of coherent world building. And what about the account of Yuki itself? What is going to happen to it? We already saw that account sharing is allowed in this game since Asuna let her mom play on her alt account. Is someone else going to take over the account of Yuki now? Honestly, it would seem like a waste not to. Sword Art Online never bothers to answer these logical questions. It just leaves threads dangling, expecting the audience to get all emotional while ignoring the glaring practical inconsistencies. It is sloppy, lazy, and yet another example of the show putting style over substance. There is a memorial service for Yuki in the real world, and a ton of people show up. But who are all these people? Her family members have already passed away. How did she possibly know so many other people? The show expects us to accept a crowded, emotional scene without any explanation, even though it makes zero sense. It is just another example of lazy writing, piling on background characters as props to make the moment seem bigger and more dramatic than it actually is. Asuna mentions how Yuki gave her something and carved it deep into her heart, saying it will always be there. And yet she will never talk about Yuki again. The show pretends this is some profound, lasting impact, but in reality it goes nowhere. All of the supposed emotion and significance evaporates the moment the scene ends. It is lazy, hollow, and yet another example of Sword Art Online building up sentiment that has no lasting meaning or payoff. It feels like this show was written by a 5-year-old. Everything is way too on the nose, and there is absolutely no subtlety anywhere. The characters say exactly what they are feeling. The story hits every emotional beat with a sledgehammer, and the drama is painfully obvious. There's no nuance, no clever storytelling, and no respect for the intelligence of the audience. It is like the writers assumed we are incapable of understanding anything unless it is spelled out in the most heavy-handed, childish way possible. Why did Asuna wear her schoolgirl uniform to the memorial? That is not the type of clothing anyone would wear to a somber event. The show clearly does not care about realism or appropriateness and just throws her in that outfit because reasons. It is another example of lazy, nonsensical choices. Trying to make a scene cute or visually familiar instead of actually respecting the tone or context of what is happening. Also, it is a Saturday, so there should not even be school. Public and private schools in Japan only run Monday through Friday. Why on earth did Asuna bother dressing up in her school uniform in the first place? The show does not think through anything and expects us to ignore these glaring inconsistencies. It is sloppy, lazy, and yet another example of Sword Art Online prioritizing visual cliches over logic or sense. Asuna meets another woman and it turns out to be the mage from the Sleeping Knights. How convenient. This character just happens to live nearby as well. How is it that all the characters in this show live near each other when Alfheim? Online is supposed to be a massive online game with countless players from around the world. The writers clearly just ignore logic and geography whenever it suits the plot. It is lazy, convenient storytelling that sacrifices realism for the sake of a forced, coincidental reunion. In real life, this other player would be living halfway across the world. The show just handwaves it and pretends she is conveniently nearby. Because apparently geography, distance, and realism are optional when it comes to plot convenience. It is another example of lazy writing, sacrificing logic and believability just to force characters together for a scene. And how did this random woman even know that this was Asuna? She never introduced herself to her in real life, so there was no reason for her to recognize Asuna. And yet the show expects us to accept it without question. It is another lazy, convenient plot device, shoved in purely to create a coincidental moment. Logic, realism, and basic human behavior are all thrown out the window just so the scene can happen. Of course the story needs this scene to happen, so apparently everyone already knows what Asuna looks like. Her real-life appearance just happens to match her in-game avatar perfectly. Even though Alfheim Online does not allow character customization and everyone is supposed to get a randomized avatar, the show expects us to ignore all of that and just go along with it. It is lazy, ridiculous, and completely breaks any sense of internal logic the game world had. Convenience over consistency as always. The woman has been discharged from the hospital. She had acute lymphocytic leukemia, but is now in complete remission. How convenient. The show wraps up her serious, life-threatening illness in a neat little package just so the story can move on. Real life does not work like this. Remission is not instantaneous, and recovery from something that's serious is messy and uncertain. But, of course, Sword Art Online needs a tidy, happy ending for this character, so it handwaves an impossible recovery just to keep the plot moving. It is unrealistic, lazy, and yet another example of the story pretending drama exists while cutting out anything that actually makes sense. And why does anyone even care about this character? I will give you $100 if you can tell me her name without looking it up. The show expects us to get emotional over a character we barely know, who has had zero development, and who exists purely to serve the story of someone else. It is lazy, manipulative, and completely absurd that we are supposed to treat her as meaningful or important. The woman says she does not feel it is fair that she is alive while Yuki is gone. Give me a break. The show acts like this is some deep, meaningful insight, but it is just forced melodrama. Real life is unfair all the time, and this moment is treated like profound tragedy when in reality it is predictable, overcooked, and completely manipulative. The writers are trying so hard to make us feel emotional that it comes across as laughably artificial instead. Asuna says that their lives are like vessels and that they carry the teachings of the ones who have passed in them. Once again, the show is trying to sound deep and profound, but it completely falls flat. It is a forced cliché line meant to manufacture emotion instead of actually earning it. The moment is hollow, over-explained, and treats the audience like we will automatically feel something just because the words are fancy. It is pretentious storytelling dressed up as meaningful philosophy. Asuna was scared of telling someone how she really felt and scared of finding out how they felt, but Yuki supposedly taught her that it was no way to live. But being afraid of consequences and being held accountable for what you say should matter. The show treats this lesson like a deep, life-changing revelation, but in reality it is obvious, basic common sense. Pretending that Yuki just handed Asuna the key to life like some mystical guru is forced, over-dramatic. And yet another example of the story inflating meaningless moments into profound life lessons. Yuki did not care because she was going to die and did not have much time left. That is understandable. But it is not the same for Asuna, who is perfectly healthy and has her whole life ahead of her. The show acts like Asuna should magically adopt the fearless attitude of Yuki as some kind of profound lesson, but it completely ignores the fact that fear, caution, and thinking about consequences are normal and rational for someone who is not facing imminent death. It is another case of the story trying to force emotion and growth where it makes zero sense. Asuna explains that Yuki taught her how to be strong and now she wants to share that with others. As long as Asuna is alive, she will supposedly pass on what she has learned from Yuki to everyone she meets. That is so dumb and forced. The show tries to turn a rushed, contrived lesson into some grand, lifelong mission, but it feels completely artificial. Instead of showing Asuna actually growing or struggling with what she learned, the story just tells us to believe she is now this infallible moral conduit. It is lazy, manipulative, and yet another example of Sword Art Online trying to manufacture depth instead of actually earning it. Yuki did not even teach Asuna anything worthwhile. All she said was that you have to fight for what you want, which is terrible advice. That line is basically telling people to just resort to violence whenever talking fails. The show tries to frame it as some deep, inspiring life lesson, but in reality, it is simplistic, reckless, and completely unhelpful. It is another example of Sword Art Online pretending that a few cliched words can carry emotional or moral weight, when they really just expose how shallow and lazy the writing is. Asuna hopes to meet Yuki again someday and tell her about all the people she has helped. That is how she will pay Yuki back. The show constantly talks about the afterlife, as if it is some literal place you can just visit, complete with reunions and check-ins. It treats death like a plot device for emotional hand-wringing rather than a serious event. Instead of exploring real consequences or grief, Sword Art Online keeps leaning on this unrealistic, comforting fantasy, which makes all the supposed emotion feel forced, hollow, and absurd. Asuna literally knew Yuki for 2 months. 2 months. They were not lifelong friends, they were not sisters. They did not grow up together. The show acts like they shared some deep, unbreakable bond, but in reality they barely knew each other. This kind of emotional attachment makes no sense and feels completely forced. Sword Art Online loves to speedrun relationships and then pretend they are profound. It is fake closeness, fake depth, and fake emotion, and the show expects the audience to just accept it without thinking. I do not even remember the people I went to high school with, and I was around them for 4 years. But I am supposed to believe Asuna formed this deep, life-changing bond with Yuki in just 2 months? That is ridiculous. Real friendships take time. They do not magically become sacred just because the show tells you they are. This is not emotional depth. It is lazy writing pretending that speed equals meaning. The other woman is so grateful for what Asuna has done for Yuki. It is so convenient that they met in the first place. If Yuki had played a different game, or if Asuna had not felt like dueling her, none of this story would exist. The show relies entirely on lucky coincidences and contrived setups, pretending they are meaningful connections. It is lazy, unrealistic, and highlights just how fragile and manufactured the entire plot really is. The other woman talks about how Yuki is like a forgetful bird who remembered how to fly and then flew out of reach. The show is trying to make it seem like Asuna saved Yuki or did something heroic, but it has done absolutely nothing to earn that. It rushes through all the setup, skips over meaningful interaction, and expects us to just accept this grand emotional metaphor. Instead of building the connection or showing real impact, it leans on overused imagery and forced sentiment, making the whole moment feel hollow, pretentious, and utterly laughable. The other Sleeping Knights member is doing great as well. The medication he is on is working. Wow, how convenient for him too. Everything just magically resolves perfectly for all the characters the show wants to care about. Real life is messy, unpredictable, and unfair, but Sword Art Online has to tie up every storyline neatly with zero effort or consequence. It is lazy, unrealistic. And yet another example of the story prioritizing forced feel-good moments over anything resembling believable storytelling. Everyone else can just magically recover from their terminal illnesses except Yuki. Of course, she is the one who has to die. This once again proves that her entire purpose in the story was to be a disposable plot device for manufactured tragedy. The show treats her death like it is meaningful and profound, but it is obvious, forced, and entirely predictable. Yuki is not a character with depth or agency. She is just a tool to make the audience cry, and it does not even work for most people like me. Asuna still wants to join the Sleeping Knights, which is a dumb thing to say. She is not terminally ill, so she does not belong. It makes no sense why she wants to join the guild so badly. She can already party with them, fight alongside them, and interact with them without being an official member. The show acts like this is some big emotional or meaningful decision, but it is completely arbitrary and forced. It is another example of Sword Art Online inflating meaningless actions to create drama where there is none. Kirito and the doctor show up as well. Kirito is also wearing his school uniform. Like I said before, this makes no sense. That is not proper attire for a memorial, and on top of that, it is a Saturday. There is no school in Japan on Saturdays for someone like him. The show just throws characters into ridiculous outfits for no reason, ignoring logic, social norms, and basic world consistency. It is lazy, sloppy, and yet another example of Sword Art Online prioritizing visual cliches over realism or sense. The doctor expresses interest in the technology that Kirito created. Of course, this line exists purely to make Kirito seem even more important and impressive. The show constantly glorifies him, treating every word and action as if it is monumental, while giving zero attention or depth to anyone else. It is another lazy way of inflating his status and forcing the audience to admire him. Instead of actually building a believable story or letting other characters have meaningful moments. The doctor explains that the metacuboid trials were extremely successful. They have enough data to proceed to the next phase, and soon patients all over the country will have access to it. Which just makes the earlier scene where Asuna said Yuki was one of a kind seem even worse. If the technology is now widely available and helping countless other patients, then Yuki is no longer unique in any meaningful way. The attempt of the show at making her character and death feel special or monumental completely falls apart, exposing just how lazy and manipulative the storytelling really is. The doctor says that since Yuki was the first person to test the metacuboid, her name will always be remembered and she would get an award for her help if she were still alive. First of all, why would anyone give an award to the test subject? It would make far more sense to give it to the inventor or the people who actually created the technology. Second, posthumous awards exist. So the whole "if she were here" line is completely unnecessary. The show is just trying to force sentiment and make Yuki seem heroic in a way that is illogical, inconsistent, and completely unearned. It is revealed that the initial designs for the metacuboid came from Kojiro Rinko. Kirito knows her since he met her once. She was taking care of the body of Heathcliff in the real world and was the head researcher for Kayaba Akihiko, which basically means that Kayaba Akihiko designed the metacuboid. The show acts like this is some big revelation, but in reality it is just another layer of convenience and fan service. It tries to connect every plot thread back to Kirito and Kayaba to make the world seem interconnected, while ignoring any logic, plausibility, or the actual implications of who really made this life-saving technology. It is convoluted, forced, and yet another example of lazy storytelling dressed up as drama. The show also cannot decide if Kayaba is supposed to be an evil mastermind or some benevolent creator. One moment, he is this cold, manipulative villain who traps thousands of players in a deadly game. And the next, he is some misunderstood genius whose work is supposedly meant to help terminally ill people. The inconsistency makes him confusing and unconvincing. Sword Art Online keeps flipping his character to suit the plot, which is lazy, sloppy, and shows that the writers have no real plan for his role or personality. And if Kayaba invented the Metacuboid, why would anyone even use it? This is the same man who trapped thousands of players in a deadly game, for crying out loud. The technology he created could have been used for something horrifying again, but the show just handwaves that completely. It makes no sense that the characters trust or celebrate this invention when the person behind it has a history of mass-scale abuse. Once again, Sword Art Online prioritizes forced drama over logic, realism, or common sense. At the end of the ending sequence, the sword of Yuki is sticking out of the ground with her headband tied around the hilt. But how is the sword even still there? She did not give it to anyone else, so it should have stayed with her avatar. The show just throws this in to look symbolic and dramatic, ignoring logic and the rules it has already established. Sword Art Online constantly sacrifices consistency for cheesy visual moments, and this is a perfect example of it. A completely meaningless, unearned attempt at sentiment. Sometime later, the characters have a picnic. Tonal whiplash does not even begin to cover it. We go from a solemn, emotional memorial scene straight to everyone suddenly laughing and enjoying themselves outdoors like nothing just happened. The show has zero sense of pacing or emotional consistency. It treats grief and loss like a speed bump to get past, rather than something that actually affects the characters. Sword Art Online rushes through tragedy and immediately replaces it with forced cheerfulness, making the whole thing feel hollow, jarring, and ridiculous. Klein is talking about a cute girl to Lisbeth and Silica, but they are both underage. It feels completely wrong for a grown man to be discussing this kind of stuff with them. The show tries to play it off as harmless banter, but in reality it is uncomfortable and inappropriate. Sword Art Online has a long history of ignoring the obvious issues with age and relationships. And this scene is just another example of lazy writing pretending casual conversations are fine when they really should not be. It is kind of weird for Klein to be hanging out with these underage girls to begin with. Sword Art Online constantly glosses over boundaries that would be uncomfortable or inappropriate in real life, treating it as if it is completely normal. The show expects you to ignore the fact that a grown man is casually joking and talking about flirtatious stuff with minors. And it is awkward, unsettling, and, frankly, kind of creepy when you actually think about it. Shoguha gives Sainon a gift. What is the point of this scene? We never even find out what the gift is. The show tosses it in for no reason, expecting us to care about a meaningless gesture that has zero impact on the story or the characters. It is lazy filler disguised as character development. Another example of Sword Art Online pretending small moments are meaningful when they are completely hollow and forgettable. Yui is watching the whole thing through the device that Kirito created. It is still weird and uncomfortable how she calls Kirito daddy. The show treats this as cute or endearing, but in reality it comes across as bizarre and inappropriate. Sword Art Online keeps leaning on this forced quirk for laughs or sentiment, completely ignoring how strange it actually is. And it only adds another layer of awkwardness to an already messy scene. Kirito thought that the closer the real world and the virtual world became, the better the future would be. But the more the lines blur, the more people get sucked into its darkness. What is the show even trying to say here? It sounds like it is aiming for some deep philosophical point, but it comes across as vague, pretentious, and poorly thought out. Sword Art Online tosses out cryptic statements like this to sound meaningful, but it never actually explains or explores the consequences. It is empty, confusing, and yet another example of the series pretending to be profound while accomplishing nothing. Kirito wishes he knew what the master plan of Kayaba was. He thinks maybe it is their job as survivors of Sword Art Online to figure it out. But it is painfully obvious that Kayaba had no plan at all. When Kirito asked him why he did all of this, his answer was literally that it had been so long he forgot the reason. The show tries to make this some mysterious, world-shaking plot, but it is just nonsense. Sword Art Online constantly pretends there is grand design or hidden meaning behind events when, in reality, it is all arbitrary and sloppy. It is lazy storytelling disguised as intrigue. And once again, the show cannot decide if Kaiba is supposed to be evil or not. One moment he is this cold, ruthless mastermind, and the next he is some mythical, almost godlike figure whose motives are beyond question. Sword Art Online treats him like a legend rather than a person, flipping his character back and forth to suit whatever plot convenience is needed. It is inconsistent, sloppy, and makes it impossible to take his actions or the story itself seriously. Asuna thinks that Kirito is overthinking things and she is right. He keeps trying to find meaning where there is none. It is like digging through a dumpster hoping to find gold. The show treats this endless quest for hidden purpose as dramatic and important, but it is really just a pointless exercise. Sword Art Online constantly inflates trivial or nonsensical events to seem profound, and the obsession of Kirito with meaning is the perfect example of the story taking itself way too seriously for absolutely no reason. Kirito says that he does not know what is going to happen tomorrow. All he knows is that he wants to be with Asuna forever, and he wants Asuna to be with him. Give me a break. The show acts like this is some profound, heart-wrenching revelation, but it is just generic, meaningless romance drivel. Sword Art Online constantly leans on empty declarations of love to manufacture emotion, instead of actually showing character growth or building real stakes. It is lazy, predictable, and completely unearned. The show keeps piling on these completely unearned moments. First, it tried to make the audience feel sad about Yuki and the sleeping nights, and now it is trying to make us feel all warm and fuzzy about Kirito and Asuna. Sword Art Online constantly swings from one forced emotion to another without ever earning a single one. It rushes, it manipulates, and it treats the audience like mindless sheep who will automatically care just because the show tells them to. It is sloppy, predictable, and painfully obvious. Let me remind you that Kirito and Asuna hated each other at first. It still makes no sense how they are suddenly so close and inseparable. The show expects us to accept this massive relationship leap without actually showing the work, the development, or any believable moments that would justify it. Sword Art Online constantly skips over logic and emotional realism, just tossing characters together and pretending their bond is meaningful. It is lazy, forced, and completely unconvincing. Asuna says that she will stick by Kirito even if he moves halfway across the planet. That is such a dumb thing to say. We already know that Kirito is not going to do that, so the line is completely pointless. Sword Art Online constantly fills dialogue with these empty, overly dramatic statements meant to sound romantic or heroic. But in reality, they add nothing, make no sense, and just highlight how forced and lazy the writing really is. And if Asuna is supposedly so devoted to Kirito, then why is switching schools such a big deal to her? If she does not go to the same school as him, she will still stick by him, just like she said. The show acts like this is some major, heart-wrenching conflict, but it makes zero sense. Sword Art Online constantly manufactures drama out of completely meaningless situations, treating trivial decisions as if they are monumental, all while completely ignoring the logic of the own words and feelings of the characters. The episode ends with the characters going to take a photo together. What a stupid way to end the arc. This is supposed to be the grand finale, the moment everything has been building toward, and instead we get a forced, meaningless snapshot. Sword Art Online treats this as if it is some heartwarming, satisfying conclusion, but it is hollow, anticlimactic, and completely undermines everything that supposedly came before. The show spends all this time trying to manufacture drama and emotion, only to finish with the most generic, pointless ending imaginable. And the picture they are taking is used during the opening of the Caliber arc. Why would they use it in a previous arc, and not this one, where it actually happens? It makes even less sense than everything else the show does. Sword Art Online constantly mishandles continuity, throwing in random visuals and callbacks wherever it feels convenient, completely ignoring logic, chronology, or any kind of narrative consistency. It is sloppy, confusing, and just another example of the careless storytelling of the show. What does any of this have to do with Sword Art Online? The show is supposed to be about surviving a high-stakes virtual reality death game, facing danger and fighting for your life. And now here we are in the real world, taking pictures and having cute little get-togethers. The contrast is ridiculous. Sword Art Online constantly abandons its own premise for boring, mundane scenes that add nothing to the story or tension. It is lazy, tonally confused, and makes you wonder why the show even bothers pretending it is about anything exciting at all. What was the point of this arc? It teaches the wrong lessons, it manipulates the audience with forced emotions, and it pretends to be heartfelt while accomplishing absolutely nothing. Sword Art Online spends time trying to make you cry or feel inspired, but it never earns any of it. Every moment is rushed, shallow, or contrived, leaving you frustrated rather than moved. The entire arc is a masterclass in wasted potential and lazy storytelling. This arc has absolutely nothing to do with Sword Art Online. It is not about surviving a high-stakes virtual reality death game, not even a little. There are no tense battles, no strategic thinking, no sense of danger. Instead, we get endless school scenes, vacations, and sappy memorials. It feels like the show completely forgot what made the series Sword Art Online in the first place and decided to turn it into a bland slice-of-life drama with swords stuck in it for decoration. The irony is brutal. A series supposedly about life or death survival now has characters strolling through forests, having picnics and taking selfies. That is supposed to be the climax of tension. It is insulting to anyone who actually paid attention to the premise of the franchise. By the end of this arc, the name Sword Art Online no longer means anything, because nothing here resembles the original concept in even the slightest way. The arc could have been done in 3 episodes, but they stretch it to 7 for who knows what reason. Sword Art Online drags out every scene, stretches meaningless dialogue, and fills time with pointless filler just to pad the runtime. Nothing new happens, nothing is earned, and the pacing becomes excruciating. It is lazy, bloated, and makes the whole arc feel like an endless slog instead of a focused story. Now let us see what people on Reddit had to say about this episode back when it first aired. A lot of people cried when one of the Sleeping Knights members broke down. Not me though. I do not even remember her name. It shows how different people can be, and more importantly, it highlights just how unearned and manipulative the attempts of the show at emotion really are. Sword Art Online expects everyone to feel something. But if you are paying attention, it becomes obvious that these moments are shallow, rushed, and designed to trick viewers rather than actually move them. A lot of people were hoping for a preview of the next arc, Alicization. But why would they include that? At this point, it was not even guaranteed that there would be a next season, so production likely had not even started. It is yet another example of how Sword Art Online fans act like they are owed something. The show constantly panders to its audience, dangling teasers and hype that make no sense given the actual production status, all while pretending it is clever or exciting. It is entitlement-driven fan service dressed up as storytelling. This commenter is glad that there was not a cliffhanger for Alicization. They point out that cliffhangers are a cheap way to generate hype that lasts only a day or two. I agree completely. Sword Art Online has a history of relying on cheap tricks to keep viewers talking instead of actually delivering a satisfying story or meaningful endings. Skipping the cliffhanger here at least shows a tiny bit of restraint, even if the rest of the show remains sloppy, manipulative, and completely inconsistent. A lot of people were annoyed at the forced Kayaba mention, and I completely agree with them. It was completely shoehorned in for no reason, just to remind the audience of a character who had nothing to do with the current events. Sword Art Online constantly drags in old plot points and characters like this, not because it serves the story, but because the writers want to lean on nostalgia or fake significance. It is clumsy, unnecessary, and yet another example of lazy storytelling. Many commenters enjoyed this second season a lot more than the first. They claimed the writing was on another level and gave it high ratings. Hard disagree. This season was terrible. None of the seasons of Sword Art Online are remotely good. These fans are delusional if they think otherwise. The show is sloppy, inconsistent, and full of lazy writing. Yet people keep pretending it is groundbreaking or emotionally powerful. It is hype-driven nonsense dressed up as storytelling. One commenter feels bad because they did not cry at any of this. Do not worry, buddy. There's absolutely nothing to feel bad about. Not crying is the normal, sane reaction. The show is complete garbage. Sword Art Online constantly tries to manipulate viewers with forced emotions and hollow, unearned moments, but if you are paying attention, you realize there is nothing of real substance to cry over. Feeling nothing here just proves you are thinking critically, instead of falling for cheap tricks. Some commenters felt that this was the best arc of the entire series. Really? What was so good about this arc? Forced emotions, recycled locations, characters acting completely out of character, and a story that barely makes sense. Sword Art Online keeps getting praised for moments that are rushed, manipulative, or completely unearned, and it is baffling. Calling this the best arc is either delusional or a sign that these viewers have completely lowered their standards. This commenter feels it is time to marathon both seasons again. Why on earth would you willingly put yourself through that? Sword Art Online is filled with sloppy writing, forced emotions, recycled locations, and nonsensical plotlines. Choosing to rewatch it is like signing up to endure the same frustrating mistakes all over again. It is baffling that anyone would voluntarily subject themselves to that kind of nonsense. Some people did not get emotional because they recognized it as manipulation. Good to see that there are still smart viewers who use their brains. This arc is packed with forced drama, rushed scenes, and shameless attempts to trick the audience into caring. Sword Art Online keeps treating viewers like mindless puppets, but at least some people are wise enough to see through the nonsense and refuse to be fooled by cheap, unearned emotions. This commenter is terrible with names and does not even know who Kaiba Akihiko is. That is laughable. The show builds him up as this big, dramatic reveal, treating him like some legendary figure. And this guy has no clue who they are even talking about. Sword Art Online constantly tries to make its past events feel epic and significant. But when viewers cannot even follow or remember the basics, it just highlights how overblown, convoluted, and poorly handled the storytelling really is. This commenter is mad that they tried to make Kayaba seem like a good guy, even though he killed thousands of players for his game and clearly has a massive god complex. They cannot stand how the show tries to turn him into some kind of anti-hero when he was the root of the problem from the very start. I agree with this guy 100%. Sword Art Online constantly rewrites its villains to make them look sympathetic or misunderstood, but it completely ignores the scale of their actions. It is lazy, insulting to the audience, and makes the story feel completely unbalanced. One commenter felt heartless for not getting emotional, and another told them not to, because there is no real emotional appeal to this arc. Everyone else is just circle jerking. I agree with them completely. This arc is complete trash. There is absolutely nothing to get emotional about because everything is rushed, forced, and manipulative. Sword Art Online keeps trying to manufacture tears out of thin air. But if you are paying attention, it is obvious the story is hollow, the drama is fake, and the whole arc is a waste of time. This commenter thought that Mother's Rosario would be about the drama between Asuna and her mom. I do not blame them. With a name like that, you would think a mother is involved, but it is absolutely nothing to do with it. Sword Art Online has never been good with naming anything. And this is just another example of how the show tries to sound meaningful or profound while delivering something completely unrelated, confusing, and misleading. This commenter says that the episode failed terribly at making them cry and that it was the most predictable thing they have seen in a long time. I am right there with them. Sword Art Online constantly tries to force emotions, but it telegraphs every sad moment from a mile away. Nothing is earned. Everything is obvious. And the show treats viewers like they are idiots who will blindly react just because the music swells or someone collapses. It is lazy, manipulative, and painfully predictable. And with that, we are finally done with this flaming dumpster fire of an arc. I will never ever have to think about this trash again. I feel like someone who just finished serving a long, miserable prison sentence and is finally thrown out into the sunlight, blinking and gasping for air, free at last. Every forced tear, every recycled location, every nonsensical plot point has been purged from my life. I can finally breathe without being haunted by the memory of this utter catastrophe of storytelling. Sword Art Online is the worst anime of all time, and this arc only cements that fact. For the people who genuinely think it is good, I have to ask why. What exactly are you seeing that the rest of us are missing? Forced emotions, recycled locations, lazy writing, broken game mechanics. Characters acting like props and plot holes you could drive a truck through. This show has it all. Calling it good is either delusional, a massive case of nostalgic goggles, or proof that some people have completely abandoned basic standards for storytelling. The only good thing about this arc is that I no longer have to watch it. I no longer have to suffer through the mess, the forced emotions, the recycled locations, and the nonsense plotlines. But then I remember there are several more arcs and movies left in this franchise. The nightmare will never truly end. Sword Art Online is like a horror that keeps coming back, no matter how many times you think you are finally free. Just when you think the torture is over, another arc appears, ready to punish your patience all over again. I should get some sort of award for suffering through this disaster and finally making it to the end. But of course I will get nothing, there is nothing. No recognition, no consolation, just the lingering headache of having wasted hours on recycled locations. Forced emotions, broken game logic, and characters acting like cardboard cutouts. Finishing this arc deserves a medal for endurance. But instead, all I get is the bitter realization that I just survived one of the worst storytelling experiences imaginable. I would not wish this upon anyone, not even my worst enemy. Watching this garbage should be classified as cruel and unusual punishment. Every moment of forced drama, recycled location, broken plot logic, and cardboard character interaction is a personal assault on your time, patience, and sanity. Surviving this arc should count as a human rights achievement, because the sheer audacity of calling this entertainment is nothing short of sadistic. The sad and pathetic part is that the fans see me as a bad person. To them, I am a villain just for pointing out flaws and explaining glaring plot holes. Criticizing sloppy writing, recycled locations, forced emotions, and broken logic apparently makes me the enemy. It is laughable. Calling someone mean for using basic reasoning is peak Sword Art Online fandom, where blind praise and hype are more important than actually noticing how terrible the show is. The Sword Art Online fans really need to grow up and get off their high horse. Acting like this trash is the pinnacle of storytelling just because it made them feel a cheap, forced emotion is pathetic. They treat every recycled location, every broken plot point, and every nonsensical character choice like it is genius, while anyone who dares to point out the obvious flaws is labeled a villain. It is laughable, juvenile, and honestly exhausting to see people defend a series this bad with such blind devotion. The reason I went in so hard and ripped this arc apart is because of the fans. They act like this trash is the best thing ever. This is the example they point to whenever someone dares to criticize Sword Art Online, waving it around like proof that any complaint is invalid. I could not stay quiet because letting people treat this recycled, emotionally manipulative, plot hole-filled nonsense as some kind of masterpiece would be insanity. Someone has to call out the garbage, and if that makes the fans angry, so be it. The fans should be angry, but not at me. They should be furious at how terrible this show actually is. The thing they worship is garbage. They are blindly following a false prophet, cheering for recycled plots, forced emotions, and laughably broken logic as if it were some kind of divine masterpiece. Their devotion only makes the absurdity of Sword Art Online even more obvious, and yet they refuse to see it. Shame on the dumb fans who allow more of this garbage to be made. Because of their blind devotion, studios keep pouring time, money, and effort into this trash instead of creating actually good shows. Meanwhile, talented creators get canceled or ignored, and we are stuck with recycled plots, cardboard characters, and forced drama that nobody asked for. If fans really cared about quality anime, this dumpster fire would have ended years ago. Sword Art Online has the worst fanbase of all time, but I guess it makes sense. A terrible show is bound to attract equally terrible fans. People who will blindly defend recycled plots, broken game mechanics, forced emotions, and laughable writing like it is a masterpiece. They attack anyone who points out obvious flaws, treat shallow characters like geniuses, and act like loyalty to a bad story is some kind of moral high ground. It is the perfect storm of an awful show plus an awful audience. You might be asking, was it worth spending all that time watching this show, writing the scripts, and editing the videos? No, absolutely not. Every second was a painful exercise in frustration and wasted brainpower. But I had to do it. Someone had to call out this garbage, rip it apart, and document the endless parade of recycled plots, forced emotions, and broken logic. If I did not, who would? The world would just keep pretending this steaming pile of trash is somehow good. The only thing that kept me going was pure rage. Not enjoyment, not curiosity, not hope that it might get better. Just raw, burning frustration. Rage at the wasted potential, rage at the lazy writing, rage at the fans who praise this mess like it is high art. Every episode was fueled by spite and disbelief, like watching a slow-motion train wreck and forcing yourself to keep your eyes open because someone has to document how bad it really is. Being bad is a tradition for Sword Art Online at this point. It is not an accident. It is not a rough patch. It is the core identity of the series. Hell would freeze over sooner than this anime somehow becoming good. At this stage, expecting quality from Sword Art Online is like expecting depth from a puddle. The disappointment is not surprising anymore. It is the only consistent thing the show delivers. Once again, my analysis for this episode is many times longer than the episode itself. That is pathetic. A 20-minute episode should not give me this much material to rant about. This is not depth. This is not complexity. This is just a non-stop flood of bad writing, plot holes, forced emotion, and lazy choices. When ripping something apart takes more time than watching it, that is not a sign of quality. It is proof that the show is a mess from start to finish. And let me remind you, this is supposed to be the best arc of Sword Art Online. This is the high point. This is the example fans proudly point to when they try to shut down criticism. If I have this much to rip apart in the so-called good part, then just imagine how much there is to say about the rest of the series. If this is the peak, then everything else is buried somewhere deep underground. Calling this the best only makes the whole franchise look even worse. The Sword Art Online fans do not like me, but that is nothing new. They never liked me to begin with, so I do not care. I did not make this criticism to be liked. I made it because the show is bad and someone had to say it. If pointing out flaws, plot holes, and lazy writing makes me the villain in their eyes, then so be it. I would rather be disliked for telling the truth than praised for pretending this garbage is good. I do not need or want the approval of Sword Art Online fans. It is completely worthless to me. Their praise means nothing when it comes from people who defend lazy writing, forced emotions, and broken logic like it is high art. If approval requires ignoring obvious flaws and clapping on command, then it is not approval worth having. I would rather stand alone than lower my standards to match theirs. The fans are going to say I have no soul because I did not cry or get emotional. And you know what? Fine. They are right. I do not have a soul anymore because this show sucked it out of me. Sword Art Online drained it episode by episode with forced sadness, fake depth, and endless manipulation. If having a soul means crying on command at lazy writing, then I am glad mine is gone. At least I can still think. The fans are going to call me a monster for saying all of this, but honestly, I am perfectly fine with that. I like being the monster. If being a monster means not clapping like a trained seal, not crying on cue, and not pretending this mess is profound, then slap the label on me and move on. As the K-pop group says, baby, I am a monster, and unlike this arc, at least that line knows exactly what it is trying to be. The fans will never grow, they will never learn. They will continue to cherish this dumpster fire like it is some divine masterpiece, clapping and crying on command while ignoring every flaw, every plot hole, every moment of lazy writing. No amount of criticism, logic, or common sense will reach them. Sword Art Online could literally catch fire on screen and they would still defend it like it is the second coming of anime. How do the fans even sleep at night? Does the sheer embarrassment of defending this garbage not keep them awake? Do they close their eyes and dream of forced emotions, recycled locations, and plot holes the size of craters and feel proud? It is baffling. I would not be able to look in a mirror without cringing if I worshipped something this bad. Yet they do it with smiles on their faces. If I liked something as terribly awful as Sword Art Online, I would never even admit it. I would take that shame to the grave. And yet the fans parade around declaring their love for this garbage like it is some badge of honor, bragging about how deep and emotional it is while completely ignoring logic, coherence, and common sense. It is embarrassing to watch, and somehow they wear it proudly. The nightmare is over, at least for now. At least until I am forced to watch the next movie or the next arc of this dumpster fire. Sure, this battle has been won, but the war is far from over. Sword Art Online will keep dragging me back into its mess, and I can already feel the dread building for the next round of plot holes, forced emotions, and recycled garbage. The suffering is far from finished. The next arc, Alicization, is much longer than this one. Brace yourself, because it is not going to be easy to endure all of the episodes. If surviving mothers Rosario felt like pulling teeth while being slowly roasted over a fire, then Alicization is like signing up for a full-on dental extraction marathon with no anesthesia. Every minute is going to be packed with overpowered characters, recycled locations, pointless filler, and plot lines that make no sense. Honestly, just thinking about sitting through it is exhausting. After slogging through this arc, I feel like I should get an award just for mental survival, and yet there is no relief in sight. The nightmare continues, and anyone who actually thought the worst was behind them is in for a rude awakening. I wish this show did not exist. Think of all the time, money, and energy that has been wasted creating this garbage. Think of all the better anime that could have been made instead. The stories that could have been told, the characters that could have been compelling and memorable. Instead, we got this endless parade of lazy writing, recycled locations, meaningless battles, and forced emotional manipulation. Every second spent watching Sword Art Online is a second stolen from something worthwhile. The franchise is a black hole that devours creativity, leaving nothing but cliches and fan service in its wake. I would gladly erase it from existence if I could, just to make space for shows that actually deserve attention. Sword Art Online is a regression. Thousands of years ago, we already had much better stories with the Iliad, the Odyssey, and countless other epics that actually understood conflict, tension, and stakes. Those tales had heroes who struggled, worlds that felt alive, and consequences that mattered. And what do we get here? A virtual reality game where nothing makes sense, bosses are skipped, characters behave like plot props, and the so-called emotional moments are slapped on with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Instead of improving storytelling, Sword Art Online collectively lowers the standards. It is like watching millennia of literary evolution get flushed down the toilet so that we can enjoy overpowered characters, recycled locations, and contrived drama. It insults your intelligence, mocks your patience, and somehow still has fans who think this is high-quality entertainment. The sad part is that because Sword Art Online made so much money, other studios are now cranking out similar trash to pander to the same gullible people who buy into this nonsense. Instead of taking risks, telling fresh stories, or creating something actually worthwhile, they see dollar signs and shovel out poorly written clones, reusing tired tropes, overpowered characters, and recycled settings. It is like watching the entertainment industry celebrate awfulness. The success of this dumpster fire has set the standard for what passes as popular now, rewarding laziness and punishing creativity. So instead of good shows getting funding, we get endless waves of this nonsense, all trying to trick people into thinking that flashy graphics and forced drama are somehow deep or meaningful. The most mind-numbing thing is that Sword Art Online has not even been fully adapted. There's apparently still one big arc left in the light novels that has not been animated. Just when you think the nightmare might be over, there is another mountain of nonsense waiting to assault your brain. After everything this franchise has thrown at viewers, lazy writing, recycled locations, overpowered characters, and forced emotions, there is still more of this trash to endure. It is almost impressive in a sadistic way. The show refuses to let you breathe, promising that the nightmare is never ending. Even the light novels cannot save it because, based on what we have seen so far, the story is built on plot holes and contrived drama. And yet, fans are eagerly waiting for it like lambs marching toward a second slaughter of their time and sanity. The writer should just quit while he is behind, but he keeps going. Instead of leaving this flaming dumpster fire in the past, he keeps cranking out more arcs, movies, and spin-offs as if the world is begging for more of this nonsense. Every new installment piles on recycled locations, overpowered characters, and contrived drama that barely even qualifies as storytelling. It is almost impressive how committed he is to ruining his own legacy. He refuses to stop, dragging along unsuspecting viewers who somehow hope for a shred of coherence or originality. The stubbornness is maddening, like watching someone repaint a sinking ship and pretending it is seaworthy, when everyone else can clearly see it is just going to sink even faster. The writer has not improved, and at this point, he never will. Every new arc, every new movie, proves the same thing over and over. Recycled ideas, lazy plotting, and forced drama are all he knows. There's no growth, no learning from past mistakes, just a relentless churning out of mediocrity disguised as storytelling. It is almost tragic in a way, except nothing about this show is worth pity. The same glaring flaws keep showing up, as if the writer is daring the audience to call him out. And somehow he still gets applauded by fans who have lowered their standards so far that anything with flashy swords and a half-baked plot counts as genius. There's no hope, no evolution, just more of the same, and worse, he's going to keep doing it. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more sword art online hate content. Keep the rage alive. Keep the hate flowing strong. There's no end to the garbage in this franchise, and I am here to rip every last bit of it apart. Join me and let us continue pointing out just how awful this show really is.